She was standing in front of a small-town diner, shivering in a thin cardigan that absolutely did not belong to a woman who owned a private jet. And yet here she was, Alexandra Reid, billionaire, tech visionary, a woman whose name usually appeared next to headlines like youngest CEO to buy an island, pretending she didn't even own a decent car. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and how old are you? And let me ask you this. If you were worth billions, would you ever hide it just to see someone's true intentions? Alexandra had her reasons. And tonight, those reasons were about to crash straight into the one man she hoped would see her for who she was, not for her money. She watched the warm glow from inside the diner fog the windows as she pulled open the door. She'd parked a borrowed, beat-up 2008 sedan around the corner just to sell the look. No driver, no security, no jet waiting on standby. She left all of that behind in New York because she wanted one thing, truth. Real, raw, undeniable truth from a man she'd been quietly observing for months. His name was Thomas Hale, a retired architect in his early 60s, a man with silver hair and soft, patient eyes that had once studied her over a cup of coffee when she'd come through this town, disguised as an exhausted traveler. She remembered how he didn't stare at her like she was something shiny. He looked at her like she was human. Do you know how rare that is for someone like her? Tonight she was meeting him again, this time on purpose, this time with a plan. She slid onto a bar stool across from him, and when he lifted his gaze from the newspaper, the warmth in his smile nearly broke her disguise. "You again," he said gently. "Thought you were just passing through." Alexandra felt her heart tug in a way that surprised her. "I needed some fresh air," she said. "A break from everything." And he nodded like he understood completely, even though he didn't know the half of it. You ever meet someone who sees right through your armor, even when they shouldn't? That's how she felt right now. But she couldn't risk showing him who she really was. Not yet. She needed to know whether he cared about her or the idea of her. She'd been burned before. Men had proposed to her after 2 dates. One cried when he found out she wasn't leaving her company to take care of him financially. Another had literally tried to hack her email. So yes, she had trust issues, but honestly, who wouldn't? As the waitress set down 2 cups of coffee, Thomas studied her face more closely. "You look tired," he said in that quiet, sincere voice that felt like a warm hand on her shoulder. "Long drive?" She swallowed back a truth she wanted to share. "Long life," she said instead, and he chuckled softly. She noticed he didn't look at her clothes, didn't judge the old sedan keys on the counter, didn't question why a woman her age, 38, was alone this late at night. Instead, he asked about her dreams, her fears, her plans, and somewhere between the clinking of dishes and the hum of late-night conversations, Alexandra felt something dangerous. Hope. But here's where things got complicated. Thomas wasn't oblivious. He sensed she was hiding something, even if he didn't know what. "Can I ask you something?" he said, leaning forward, elbows resting on the counter. "Why does it feel like you're carrying something heavy? Something you don't want anyone to see?" His voice wasn't accusing. It was tender. And that tenderness terrified her. Because trust, real trust, is terrifying when you haven't felt it in years. She hesitated, choosing her words like fragile glass. "What if I told you that I'm not exactly who I look like?" He shrugged gently. "Then I'd say most people aren't." And that answer pulled the air straight from her lungs. She wanted to tell him everything. The jet, the company, the money she no longer trusted anyone with. But instead, she smiled weakly and sipped her coffee. When they left the diner, he walked her to the sedan without judgment. "This old thing," he laughed kindly, "has character." She looked at him with a mix of disbelief and relief. Was this man real, The next afternoon, he invited her to a local community fundraising event, a small, humble gathering with homemade cookies and folding chairs. No paparazzi, no formal speeches, just neighbors helping neighbors. She watched him greet people by name, carry heavy boxes for elderly volunteers, and listen to stories with genuine interest. He was gentle. He was thoughtful. He was exactly the kind of man she'd hoped existed somewhere in the world. But she still didn't know if he'd stay when he learned who she really was. Later that evening, as they walked by the riverside, Thomas suddenly stopped. "I like spending time with you," he said quietly. "But I feel like every time I get close to knowing you, you step back. Why?" Alexandra's heart pounded beneath her cardigan. She wanted to grab his hand and tell him everything, but fear pressed against her like a shadow. "If I showed you who I really am," she whispered, "I'm afraid you'd treat me differently." And for the first time, his expression shifted, curious, maybe even hurt. "Why would you think that?" Before she could answer, her phone vibrated. A private alert, something she hoped wouldn't happen today. The message flashed across the screen, her pilot confirming that her jet had landed nearby, ready for pickup just in case she needed to return for an urgent board meeting. But Thomas saw the reflection of the message on her face. "Jet?" he repeated softly. She froze. The secret she had tried so hard to hide had just stepped into the light. Thomas didn't raise his voice. He didn't step back. He didn't even blink in shock the way most people did when they learned who she truly was. Instead, he looked at her with this steady, searching expression, like he was trying to understand what part of that single word had just hurt her. Alexandra felt her throat tighten. Everything she'd tried so hard to hide was suddenly exposed. No beat-up sedan, no simple cardigan, no small-town disguise could protect her now. She braced herself for the shift, for his eyes to turn calculating, impressed, greedy, or intimidated. But he just stood there, hands in his pockets, waiting for her to breathe. She swallowed hard. "Thomas, I didn't want you to know." Her voice cracked. "I didn't want anyone here to know. I came to this town because I was tired of people loving the wrong version of me." She expected him to cut in, but he didn't. He let her talk, which somehow made her more emotional. "I hid my jet. I hid everything. I needed to know if someone could see me without the money, without the headlines, without all the noise." She looked down at her shoes, embarrassed at how childish the whole thing suddenly sounded. "I just needed someone real." Thomas stepped closer. Not too close, but close enough that she could hear the river behind him soften into background noise. "You think I'm upset because you have money?" he asked gently. "Alexandra, money doesn't impress me, but secrets do make me wonder." His tone wasn't angry, it was honest, and honesty, she realized, was scarier than judgment. "If you were in his place," she whispered to the viewer inside her thoughts, "what would you do? Would you feel betrayed? Or would you understand why she hid it?" She exhaled shakily. "I didn't lie about everything," she said. "Just the parts that always ruin things." And then she told him about her company, her responsibilities, the way men had treated her like a prize instead of a partner, the way loneliness felt heavier when you had no logical reason to feel lonely at all. And when she finally lifted her eyes to his, there was no rage there, just a quiet sadness. "Alexandra," he said softly, "I don't care that you're wealthy. I care that you didn't trust me enough to tell me who you really are." His words stung, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. She felt something inside her drop. "I was going to tell you," she whispered, "just not like this." He nodded slowly. "I believe you. But trust, it's a two-way street. You want someone to see your heart? Then you have to let them." She blinked back tears. She'd been the one judging. She'd been the one assuming that every man wanted something from her. And now here was Thomas, hurt not by her wealth, but by the wall she built around it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The evening breeze brushed past them, carrying the faint scent of pine and river water. She wished she could rewind everything, show him the truth from the start. But she couldn't undo it. Still, he didn't walk away. Instead, he said, "Come on, let's sit." They moved to a wooden bench overlooking the fading sunlight. Her hands trembled slightly on her lap. She wasn't afraid of losing money. She was afraid of losing this, the first man in years who saw her like she mattered without a dollar sign attached. Thomas leaned back, eyes on the sky. "You know," he said, "I've been alone a long time too. Not for the same reasons as you. But loneliness, it feels the same no matter how much you have in the bank." She listened, surprised he'd share something so personal. "I wasn't looking for anyone. But then you walked into that diner, tired and guarded, and for some reason, I kept hoping you'd come back." Her chest tightened. "I did," she whispered, "because being around you felt like breathing again." He smiled faintly, and for the first time since the secret slipped, hope flickered between them. Before she could respond, a black SUV rolled quietly up the road. Her security team, uninvited, alerted by the jet pilot's check-in. 2 guards stepped out, scanning the area. Her heart dropped. This was the exact life she'd tried so desperately to hide from him, and now it was unfolding right in front of him, unavoidable and suffocating. Thomas glanced at the SUV, then back at her. "This is your world," he said quietly. "Isn't it?" She nodded, tears threatening again. He wasn't angry, he wasn't jealous. But he looked overwhelmed, like he was wondering whether a man like him could ever fit into a life like hers. Before she could explain, one of the guards approached. "Ms. Reid, is everything all right? We came as soon as the pilot—" She held up her hand sharply. "Not now." But the damage was done. The bubble of simplicity she'd protected around them had burst. Thomas stood slowly, brushing off his jacket. "I should let you handle your world," he said with a soft, almost resigned sigh. I wish you trusted me sooner." "Please don't go," she whispered. He paused. For a long, painful moment, he paused. But then he said, "I just need some time to think." He touched her arm gently, then turned and walked down the path, leaving her standing between 2 worlds, the one she owned and the one she wanted. She watched him disappear into the trees, her heart sinking with every step he took away from her. For the first time in years, Alexandra felt powerless, and she knew. If she didn't fight for this, she might lose the only real connection she'd found in a decade. But the question hanging in the air was brutal. Would he come back? Or had her secret destroyed everything? If you were her, what would you do next? And that was the moment Alexandra made a decision that would change everything. A decision that would either win back his trust or prove she never deserved it. But what she didn't know was that Thomas was about to uncover something about her past, something she didn't expect, that would shift this story in a direction neither of them saw coming. If you want to hear the final part of this story, just kidding, this is the final part. Now here's the ending. 3 days later, after giving him space, Alexandra showed up at his doorstep. Not with guards, not with luxury, not with anything but honesty. She apologized, explained her fears, and told him she didn't want a man who loved her money. She wanted a man who loved her heart. And Thomas, after listening quietly, finally smiled. "Then stop hiding it," he said. "Let me meet the real you." And she did, slowly, carefully, openly. For the first time, she let someone into her world without the armor. In the weeks that followed, Thomas learned to navigate her life, and she learned to appreciate the calm of his. They didn't fix everything overnight. They didn't rush. They simply chose each other, one genuine conversation at a time. And you know what? That's how real love works. Trust isn't built on wealth or status. It's built on vulnerability, on choosing honesty even when it's terrifying, on showing someone your real heart and hoping they stay. If this story touched you even a little, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. And tell me below, do you believe someone can love you for who you are, even if you come with a world that scares them?